Hey you guys, this is Josh
and Carolyn
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought.
This week we're going to be talking about planning for your homestead.
It may seem early, it's not even the end of the year yet, but this is the time of the year to get ready for next year, to be at least thinking about it now so you've got some time to get a plan together. So we're just going to walk you through kind of more our strategy and thought process than some manual, but just how we approach planning and what we do to get it all done.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, we've got some Chit Chat. So if you're new to the Pantry Chat, if you want to skip ahead to the main topic, we have it all time-stamped for you, because we're going to chit-chat for a minute first.
That's right.
Hey, sorry.
We like the chit-chat.
We like to chit-chat. We missed you guys last week. We were off away from the homestead, doing some planning. And I missed you. I missed having coffee with you.
I missed hanging out with you too.
Yeah, you too.
Well, we hung out, but not in this way. And but yeah, and rule number one on planning maybe is like you kind of need to carve out some time to get away to plan. It's very hard to plan in the midst of everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, so yeah, we took some time out both to be planning business and homesteading family, and what we're going to be doing with you guys next year, and a little bit of what we're doing here at Riverbend in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so aside from planning and traveling, what have you been up to?
Wow, well, just getting ready for winter, really, which we're pretty dialed in, but there's always, it's a homestead, and there's always things trickling, and it always comes down to the wire, which it looks like it's about to do. We've actually got a bit of snow on the forecast for the first time.
Now about 6-7 inches of snow on the forecast for the next 10 days.
10 days or so, so that might change, but this summer we've gotten more. Last winter, we always got less than what they said.
Okay.
Forecast for light. But so far, the second half of this year, since the drought, and the dry spell stopped, we've consistently got more moisture than they've called for. So I'm definitely wanting to be prepared. We're getting stuff put up that we don't want stuck under snow. Mm-hmm. We've got all our feed in. We've got to get the chickens in. They're out in the chickshaw, out on the pasture. Yeah. So there's a few things to do in the next few days. Yeah. To get ready for that, and really that's the main thing right now. It's just getting ready.
This morning you were out putting some straw mulch down, straw
hay mulch,
down on the brand new terrace beds to keep them from eroding, and I think that's exciting that we'll be able to plant in those next spring.
Yep, we've got a fair bit of extra ground that is closer to the kitchen, so we're bringing some of that garden in, where it's a little more efficient. It's actually also on a nice slope where it's got good southern and western exposure, which every bit of that we can get up here is very valuable. And any little extension of direct daylight or
sunshine,
solar gain is really, really good. Yep.
Yeah, we need that up here. So good.
Yep.
All right.
What about you? Anything else going on here? I mean, you're inside, so we're not getting pushed on that level.
In some ways. However, you still have to have the home side ready for the weather, right? Including winter clothing. So you guys have heard me talk a lot about the clothing switch. What I didn't get to in the clothing switch was like the snow clothes and the ski clothes and the clothes for being out in the actual snow and like playing in the snow or working in the snow. So I do need to get to that. I haven't done that yet. So that is on my list. But aside from that, this time of year is actually really pantry management heavy. Which is interesting. You don't think about it quite the same way, but there's a lot of things that have come in to either ripen slowly or finish ripening, or they're kind of in a suspended state, like not quite root cellar. So they're not going to last for months, but you get some things you can get 4-6 weeks of vegetables just hanging out.
Examples?
Examples like the cabbage that I have not turned into sauerkraut, and we're still consuming fresh. So we don't have an ideal place that, some people can take cabbage through the winter. It can be
stored long time, right? Yeah. But you're getting that one's getting a lot more particular than say the winter squash that you can stretch through. Even the onions and potatoes and things, you can stretch them through without ideal conditions. But some things like cabbage is one. Like it's just not going to go very long if you don't have an ideal condition for it.
Yeah, those, and then we have the winter squashes that are not the long storers, and those are taking a lot of maintenance. And then the tomatoes, the green tomatoes that we brought in and box ripened, those are actually actually ripening really quickly this year. I talked about that in one of the last pantry chats. Multiple people said they were experiencing the same thing. This has been a challenging tomato year across the board. We've just heard that from a lot of people.
I think we say that every year.
We might say that every
North
year.
Idaho.
Yeah, that's a good
We
point.
feel like we should be able to do better.
We do. But oddly enough, usually we can have these green tomatoes will often ripen in the box in the house until December. And I think maybe by the end of this week, I will have them all have ripened and done. So very different year as far as the tomatoes. I think maybe that's because we did a better job ripening them on the vine. They were more ripe when we brought them in than they often are.
Yeah, that's my theory, is they didn't come in green. Very few of them came in green.
Totally
they got
green.
a little further out there in the hoop house. And because I think they were already starting to go, I think that's causing them to go faster. And some of them even getting a little rot or a little this and that. And it might be the variety too. I think we're going to try a different variety next year, one that we know that we've done. And this one's worked good for us for a few years, but it's the first time
this
we've
is the
gone
Jory.
through this process with them.
The Jory sauce tomatoes. Done pretty well, but I think we're ready to try something different.
Well, an Amish paste tomato. We've done well with those, and a subscriber named Daryl up in Canada. Hey Daryl, that I talk to off and on.
Okay.
He did Amish paste, and he's done them a few times, and I think they worked really well for him as well.
In a really short season.
And I think they're ripening indoors. I know he brought a lot of his indoors to ripen.
Well, and I do have to say the other variety.
Let us know, Daryl, how that's going.
Yeah, the saucies.
Yeah.
Is another.
Determinate.
That's a determinate paste tomato. Unlike the Jories are an indeterminate, and those are ripening really nicely and have really just, some of them do better than others when they're box ripening, and the saucies have been really good. So.
Well, and that's a lot of people ask us, like, what varieties do you grow? And it's great, we can talk about that, but the reality is you've got to work with your environment, and some varieties just do better than others, so it often takes a few years. This is our third growing season on this property, and it's actually quite different than where we live just a half an hour away, even though we've been up here for 8 years. And so it takes a little bit of time to find out what works best, and always, experimenting until you get to where you want to be with something. Yeah. So good. So the pantry's coming along?
Pantry, just managing pantry, which means I'm still doing a bit of preserving.
Yeah.
Because as things ripen or as things start to soften or different things like that, I'm having to take them from the kind of common storage state where they're just sitting there to either canned or frozen or freeze dried or doing different things with them.
I gotta tell you, the freeze dryer to me, and watching you, seems to really make the processing a lot easier and more efficient. Like it's freeing up some of your time.
It definitely is, especially for things like tomatoes and bell peppers, and that is really, really going a lot faster. One of the reasons for that is you don't have to peel the tomatoes, which is just a huge time saver, and we're enjoying it. We've been making spaghetti and different sauces and things out of the freeze-dried tomatoes, and they turn out great. It's very similar to fresh. Yeah. It just really is. You just have to rehydrate it. So.
Well, and I bring it out because I think it's another reason the freeze dryer, we're learning how valuable it is.
Yeah.
And the time savings in processing and that's very valuable in the fall and this time of year. Really any time, but right now. The way in which you process and how much of your time it consumes and cleanup and everything else. And while it takes a while to get a batch through, it's pretty efficient, and it leaves you able to do other things, and it's pretty easy to then get it into the jars and sealed and on. So it's a pretty efficient process.
It really is.
Which makes you able to get more done without being stressed about it.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, you want to do a question of the day?
Question of the day, yeah, you bet. Let's see, we had one here we picked out. Okay, Nanny Jenkins on rendering your own lard. All right. Carolyn, can you mix fats and still store and use them safely? Meaning, can I use beef and pig fat and render them down in the same pot and use them in the same way later? Good question. I like that thinking.
Yeah, I really like that too. I can't see any reason why you could not do that. I have never done it, and I really like the idea of it because, pig fat and lard has its benefits, and tallow and beef fat has its benefits. And I feel like if you rendered them together, you might kind of get a combined benefit of that. So I kind of like that, actually, but I have never done it, but I cannot see any reason why that would present any sort of a safety or storage problem, because you treat them the exact same way and you store them the exact same way. So I think they would be absolutely fine to be stored together and rendered together.
Cool idea. And that's how we learn. Once you know, hey, it's okay. Maybe nobody's done it, but there's nothing wrong with doing it. And you try it out and you see, and you might even end up playing with ratios. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of tallow as far as using it in food. Has its purposes elsewhere, but I've got some good friends in California that do a lot with tallow, and they love it.
That's their favorite way to cook.
Yeah. So some of it's going to depend on your own personal taste.
Why is it that you don't prefer tallow in food?
I don't like the taste of it. I love the lard. Good quality lard, and we've got good quality tallow we've had. I just have not preferred the taste of it. And anything that it's been out front. I don't know if you've used it in places where,
Sometimes I sneak things in.
Sometimes you can't tell, but usually, and you haven't really cooked that I know of with lard in a while.
With tallow.
I'm sorry, with tallow, yes.
While,
lard all the time.
Yeah.
And it just didn't set well.
I'll tell you why I don't prefer it in cooking is because it's hardening temperature where it starts to go solid again is a lot warmer than lard. So what that means is it kind of starts to coat things and thicken up really early, and I don't like the feel of that in my mouth. Like, to me, it feels very different. However, it is a great oil, and there are great places, especially in baked goods, that you can apply it, and it can be great. As for like putting it on your bread or frying things in it,
not so much.
Not our favorite.
Now, lard can replace butter, and that's great. You've done that. I mean, she's actually taken, like, because of our family, we'll do toast in the broiler, right? And in the oven. And instead of doing butter, she's done lard on it. And a lot of times people don't even notice in the household. So the lard really is a great replacement for butter.
So I'm wondering, though, if you mix the lard and the tallow, that might soften that kind of tallow effect on it and extend your lard, really, is what that might do. So it gives you more fat to use for something aside from making soap and candles.
Sounds like something we might experiment with.
Maybe. I don't know.
We're butchering here in about a week. So a little over a week.
Good. Yeah. All right. Great question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's get down to the topic, and it's one that's easy to talk about, but it's also very easy to put off and not get done. Because it's hard. It is hard to sit down and plan and think out that far in the future and arrange everything, and it can get very overwhelming. But it makes a huge difference in being successful, in lowering stress, and increasing just your quality of life, and in a life that's, a lot of hard work in a lot of ways. And so we want to do our best to be well planned out. Neither Carolyn or I are real super, like, highly
detailed.
Have a book, have a detail, though I think we're getting more that way. We're using certain tools. It's just maybe not a central organization. But we think it out a lot. We plan it out. We do make notes, and we are starting even to keep some digital notes more. And check them off and say, what did we say? What did we prioritize? Okay, let's tackle this now. Now let's do this. Or, hey, this is on the calendar. So you got to find what works for you is what I'm getting to in the planning. But however it is, whether you keep it all up in here and talk about it, or whether you like a highly organized planning system, you need to do your planning.
And I think a majorly important part of this is if you're working with somebody else on the homestead, aligning your goals by hashing it out on paper before you're having to hash it out in the field or the hardware store is a really, really helpful thing. It just reduces a lot of the stress in the year. So being able to make sure you're aligned on paper, you're aligned on priorities, what you're going to tackle, what's important to you versus what's important to the other people involved. And, you know, this is a great process if you're a, you know, married couple and you have children in the house. It's a great process to get the kids involved in to some extent too, and ask what their opinions and their thoughts are.
Absolutely.
And start, you know, allowing them to feel like their voice is heard in the process also. I think that's really, really valuable to getting people to feel valued on the homestead.
Yeah.
So anyways, just take the time to do it. But like Josh said a minute ago, it's really hard to do in your daily life. It's really hard to just say, hey, let's sit down this evening after the craziness of the day and let's write out our plans for the year. Like that just, it doesn't really work that way.
Well, it's challenging. You got to carve out time, because that's where it ends up, is often at the end of the day, wow, we really need to tackle this. But at the end of the day, you're tired. You've been through a long day. You want to sit down and rest. You want to hang out with your spouse or your family or whatever's going on. And honestly, the brain just isn't connecting well.
Right.
And this is, and nor is it easy to get done in the beginning of the day, because there's usually stuff to do.
Yes.
You got to be out doing.
Yeah.
And so this is why carving out time just to plan is important.
Yeah. If that means that you have to like go out somewhere, then do it.
Take a night out, whatever. You got to plan the plan.
You got to plan the plan. Absolutely.
Get that on the calendar.
And the other thing that I would say as you're thinking about how to actually get some planning in is, did you see that? He has hair. I know we've gotten those comments before, like, why do you wear your hat all the time? He took it off. Did you see?
My hat. I like my bucket.
Like,
I do. I got hair.
He's got hair.
Actually, didn't wear one the whole time we were gone.
Okay. I thought something was different.
I'm glad you noticed.
But also build in some time to like sit down and do your planning and then revisit it like a week later. Because sometimes you get so focused on what you're thinking right then that you forget about all these other things, you know, that are really important. And so sitting on it for a week or two before you finalize a plan is a really great thing to do, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's go into approaching planning. We know we need to take the time to plan. We need to plan the plan. We need to carve out the space. You got to have somewhere. That's the first thing you got to do, and get some dedicated time for that. And it may take a couple of moments of time. Yeah. And so from there, really, we want to look at big picture first.
Right.
It's easy to go to little things. I'm going to improve the chicken coop, or I'm going to do this to the barn, or I've got this fencing project, or we're going to bring in new animals. And those are all important. They all fit into the picture. But really, we've got to go higher level and broader, bigger perspective first.
Right.
And deal with the things that are overall important and large.
Yeah.
And I think as a man and a woman, we have our inclinations to approach things, which makes a great balance. You tend to think like right out. You were bringing things that were relational,
right?
Family, vacation, things that we're doing together, making sure we're carving out proper space for ourselves. Where I'm automatically kind of go into big picture. What are the major projects we've got to do on the property? What's that overarching deal? And both of those are really, really important. So we want to start up at those levels. Yeah,
absolutely. So for me, when I think about it, I think, okay, the first thing we have to do is look at the calendar and block off the big, like you said, relational moments, right? Like I've been meaning to take this child on a special backpacking trip, or a special this trip, or do this other thing. Or maybe it's that family vacation that you guys haven't made it on for a while. Like getting those things blocked on the calendar and kind of set aside so that you know that they're there, to me is the first thing that I think about. And I think we need to do that and make sure those things, because we know how easy it is to get into the doing, and then all of a sudden the time is gone. Yeah. And we've missed the time to do that. But then, like you said, the projects. So what kind of projects?
Yeah, well, your larger, I start with the larger scale infrastructure projects. And of course, we've been here 3 years. We had a lot of work to do. We still do. And we're kind of on a plan of getting some of the larger infrastructure. That could be fencing. That could be building a barn or adding on to a barn. It could be an addition or a major home improvement. Maybe you're building a cellar. Yeah. Maybe you're improving the preservation kitchen. I mean, there's a million things it could be, but it's those big projects that I know for us, we think we can do it all sometimes. We're like, we're going to add on to the barn. We're going to fence 40 acres. We're going to bring in new pigs. We're going to, build a cellar, and on and on and on. And when we're talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, we can do all that. Or we'll even have our list of priorities of what's top priority, but this is a big old long list we're going to get done, and we'll just see how much we can get through. And that's really just not a good strategy the more we get to it. I mean, some of that, yeah, you know, you can push the envelope. So I think you got to come back to what's important, blocking out. You may not even be able to get on the calendar. Sometimes we got to move things around, but we say, okay, we want a family vacation of some sort, or we're going to, even if we can't take like going away for a week or two, which we try to, but we're going to do so many things with family. Yeah. Sometimes it's individual people. So it's kind of that self-care.
Yeah.
And that might be related to your faith. That's definitely related to your family. Definitely related to marriage. You need to make sure and take time to, so get all those things, at least bullet pointed out.
On the list.
Right. And usually you kind of know those are going to fit in certain places. We have our places where we know most of those things fit in close. Right. Then we're looking at the projects, right? And like next year, fencing's a big project for us. So that keeps coming out. We've done a lot of temporary fencing. We're looking to move on to some permanent fencing. We've got additions to finish. Yeah. So we have to prioritize those. What's the most important thing to do first? You know, and so if we've got like 4 projects, let's list those out. Which one, you know, do we say we tackle this first, this, and then how does it fit into the calendar? Right. Yeah.
So how do those projects get onto the list? Like, how do we decide, you know, that we're going to do fencing and then we're going to do something else, like in that order? Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I think it just kind of comes to where you're at in time and what your greatest need is. And so it's been, you know, we've got on this property, and one of the things we didn't have is fencing. So we didn't even have our cows here the first few years. Right. We did some temporary fencing for the smaller animals and the dairy cow, and we've even kept our sheep herd down, and we've been wanting to start, you know, growing a pig herd, which we haven't done until this year because we're kind of getting the infrastructure in. So it's kind of depending on where your needs are, and we've said, okay, we're getting the animals in. We've gotten some of the other basics down for water for us, barn where we can store a lot of feed and house the animals in the winter. Some of those we've gotten under control. Right. Now we can reach out further. So I guess as I'm saying it, I'm almost thinking what I naturally think is up close. What are the major things up close? Kind of that permaculture zoning. Okay. You know, and what are the infrastructure things or the big things that are close to us that affect our daily movement more? Right. And then starting to work out. Yeah. Okay. And so like that for us, the next year's the fencing is a natural extension. Yeah. You know, there's still stuff to do around here up close, but we've got more animals now. We've got to go from temporary to a little bit more permanent, and even probably some temporary out, because we're not going to get 40 acres fence next year. Yeah. But we'll move in that direction.
But we'll try.
Right. So that's for us. And we haven't even completely finished this process yet. But that is probably priority number 1. Yeah. Is a certain level of fencing next year.
Yeah, I know another way that we often look at it is by kind of looking back at where the pain points are from the previous spots, like what isn't working, or where are we hung up, or where can we not move forward because we don't have the right infrastructure. We don't have the right pieces in place. So kind of looking back, and so this is, I want to say it's kind of a fluid process. It's not just like put your goals down and then, you know, match it to your budget and then go. Because there's a lot of fluidity here of like looking back, looking forward, what do we hope to do, what's not working, what is working, and kind of talking around these things. And, you know, some of this, again, goes back to the why you need to get away from the homestead, because sometimes you think you know what you want to do. But as you start talking about it and you start figuring out, you know, having a conversation back and forth, you start really refining that thought. You know, what really is the biggest problem? What really is holding us back the most? Or, you know, what really is not working and consuming a lot of our time? Right. And that really is going to help inform what goes on that priority and goal list.
Well, and real example here for us is water. So we tackled water right in the beginning. We've got great water here, but we had an inferior system to manage, you know, to distribute the water through the property the way we needed. So we started improving that right away. We've learned now after a couple summers, and especially after a really tough summer that was dry this year, that our storage just isn't enough to get the property through. And so that's probably going to be priority number 2 as far as a project next year, is increasing that water storage, because we really bumped into it hard this year. We got by and we could deal with it, but that's one of those things that, hey, this isn't working, you know, and so we're going to come back to it because water is very, very high up on the list. Absolutely. To work. Yeah. And with the fencing, animals are going to be out further, and so we've got to distribute water further. So those two actually tie in together. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Good. So that's kind of the major projects. That's dealing with like the major infrastructure.
Right. Those are those big pieces, but you have to really carve out. They may, you may work over them the whole summer, but you got to know, because otherwise, a lot of us as homesteaders, we're go-getters, we're going to work hard, and you just grind, and you feel like you're not getting enough done. You get stuck in a project in winter hits, and so it's important to try to be realistic. You're covering, taking care of your personal health, mental health, emotional, all of that with some of that planning.
Yeah.
You're getting some of these big things. Okay, we can tackle X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's just X and Y. Maybe it's just X, depending on what it is.
Sure.
But being realistic about that, then you start to get down to kind of the regular
little
stuff
projects
of the homestead. Well, garden planning, right? Animals. Some of those
specifics.
things.
How's that?
Specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important piece, because it's easy to start getting some of these lists and then like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
We're ready. We know what we're going to do first. But taking the time to go ahead and dive into the specifics planning is really important too. Gardening's a great example of that. Taking the time to lay out where, any improvements you're going to make to your garden, how you're going to do it, what you're going to plant where, just is really going to set you up so that in the spring, when it's time to go, you're ready to go. You know what's going in the ground. You know when you need to plant it. And if you have steps before that are going to be necessary in the garden, maybe you need to do some soil amendment, you need to do some different things there. And so you'll be ready for that, and it'll just really help you go when it's time to go, which is really helpful. If you can actually take action when the sun's shining, make hay when the sun's shining, then that really helps step you ahead.
Yeah, it really does. So you're really going through the garden year, and how did it work for you? What got on the shelf? Did you meet your goals? Were you needing to get a lot more on the shelf? Were you trying to extend your season? And I think, again, part of planning is being realistic. You can only do so much at one time. So you've got to pick if we're talking about garden, what's the most important thing to improve next year? Is it soil amendment? Is it, season extension? Is it,
watering
the right
system?
Watering system? Is it, is it down to varieties? Hey, this variety wasn't working for us. Or, hey, we grew a lot of this, but we didn't really eat very much of it. So maybe, maybe we need to allocate some, less space here and more to something else. And you can definitely do multiples of those. Those you kind of do every year. I think we're always tweaking and figuring out, what works and what to grow more of or less. And that's pretty fluid compared to maybe soil amendment or water systems. But those are still projects that you got to fit into there and think through in the whole of planning, say, your garden season.
Absolutely. Can I give just a really off-topic plug right here, which is that if you haven't gotten your seeds yet, start thinking about that and get them soon this year.
Absolutely.
This year is a good year to get your seeds early, which means you may have to bump up your garden planning a little bit earlier, but it's a good year to get it done.
Well, and I'm going to say it, I think this is the new normal. I think, it's just this, there's so many industries that are affected, but the seed industry is a good example. Catching up to the changing demand and changing environment is going to take years for seed companies to do. The orders have now gone through the roof. There's all kinds of things happening. They're affected by other supply and demand issues. And so, used to be we get our catalogs around January, and we've been thinking in our minds, we get the catalogs, we get excited, and we start ordering in there. And that's really not going to be wise anymore, because you're going to be running into things that are already out. And it's going to be hit and miss. And so you're really right. It's time to be thinking about that now, as is garden tools and supplies as well.
Well, and household supplies also, like all of those things. And it's a good time to start moving towards the model of always have a year's worth of seeds. If you're not doing that, the time to buy next year's seeds is probably in the spring this year. So that you have a lot of time to do pickup work if you can't find what you need. So this is a good time. Always have a year's worth of seeds in the bank.
Yeah, it really is. We've gotten very used to having things on demand.
Yeah.
And we're learning that that's, not always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry to hijack the conversation.
Yeah, so we're taking, basically we're looking at planning from the upper tier things, which we brought in first is family, relationships, personal well-being, planning those things in. Fitting in what are the large projects, how many you get in, and then starting getting at the daily flow. Gardening's an example. What else? Managing your animals. How are the systems there? How are you feeding them? What do you need to tweak? What do you need to do? Are you raising more or less? That's a whole other system on a homestead.
Pantry systems.
I was going to say, so what's some inside, some
pantry
interior
systems are definitely important to be thinking about. What did I have enough of? What do I need more of this year? And that doesn't necessarily even mean for growing, but just for getting on your pantry shelf. So if you can grow more and preserve more, that's great. But maybe you need to think ahead and just make some bulk purchases too. But making sure that those systems are getting a little bit further ahead every year. If you're homeschooling, thinking about what's working in the homeschool side, what's not working, what you want to adjust. And for me personally, I often, especially as a homeschooling mom, get down into each child and think through like what are advancements that I'd like to see in each child? What are the things that maybe they're struggling with or they're lacking with and they need a little bit more focus on certain things? I do this on character pieces. This person's really struggling with telling a few lies, and what can we do to help bring that up? So just really dialing it in, maybe getting dinners on the table every day. A fresh dinner is something that's the struggle, and you need to think about, okay, how do I bring this system up a little bit more and how do I make it better?
Yeah.
So just again, it's just that what's working well, what's not working well, what needs to be improved.
Yep. And you got to take your time to just go through all areas of life. Like one that's coming up for me right now that I've not been good at is vehicle maintenance. We get it done, but I haven't planned it out very well. And so I'm always bumping into it going, I got to get this done. I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
I haven't set up a plan. And, we've got teenagers now. We've got multiple vehicles. We've got multiple farm vehicles, small equipment. And it is not cool when you really need something to work and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And so that's a weakness for me in my planning is like I get it done throughout the year, but it's always a problem there because I'm not planning it out. That actually hasn't fit in. So think through some of those areas, and you can't tackle everything every year, but you can start adding things in as you go along and you realize, hey, we've got a weakness here, let's focus on this. Let's make a system for this and improve this.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think I had a wrap-up idea. I know we're getting close to the end, and that is just being realistic in setting what you're going to do to where you want to set goals to where they push you a little bit, but they're not unrealistic.
Yes.
So you to where like, I'm going to try to get this done. If you don't get it done, it's not the end of the world, but it also doesn't feel like failure, but it's pushing you a little bit. That's the sweet spot in planning, in between not planning at all and like, well, we're going to get everything done, which is Carolyn and I. We're just going to go after it and get it all done. The sweet spot in there is really those goals that push you a little bit that are going to be, it's going to be tough, but we can do it. We think we can do it.
Right.
And either you get it done or you get close and you feel really good about that and it's very productive.
Right.
And I think that mindset
No, that's really good.
really important.
That's really good. We want to minimize the blood, sweat, and tears, or at least the blood and tears. There's probably going to be a bit of sweat involved, but being realistic.
There's a little blood and tears too throughout the year.
Well, the way we plan, there often is, so we're trying to scale back ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's life on the homestead, but not too many of them.
Yeah, try to reduce them, minimize them.
Absolutely.
Hey, you guys, it's been great hanging out with you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
See you soon.
Goodbye.